Last year I spent the month of March teaching at Evangelical College of Theology in Manipur, India. And it took a while to prepare for the trip because this trip was going to be halfway around the world in a whole new culture, and it was going to be for a month. So, my friend and traveling partner, we did all the work to think about timing and airfare and visas and packing lists. And the day came. We left Philadelphia International Airport and we traveled around the world to Delhi, India. When we got to Delhi, we had to leave the international terminal and make our way to the domestic terminal because the rest of our flights were going to be in India. Well, as we pulled up to the domestic terminal, we saw a military guard at the door, and he had a little barcode scanner. He was checking everyone's passports and their airfare, their airline tickets. Well, we didn't have airline tickets, at least not paper ones. Everyone else was scanning these tickets, and the barcode reader would flash green for approval that they could go in and check into their flight. But we did have email, and so I pulled out my phone and it had a barcode. He scanned the barcode and it flashed red. I was really nervous. We had just done all this planning, all this prepping. We're about to spend a whole month teaching in India. Was our trip going to be derailed before it even got started? Well, as we continue studying the life of the nation of Israel through the book of Exodus, they come to one of those moments where they hit a massive roadblock. They have finally been liberated from Egypt, and yet they're still in Egypt. They're faced with a serious situation. What we learn from this is that liberation is a process. I mean, think about the process of liberation that enslaved peoples faced here in our country, in the United States. It was a major process, not easy at all. Well, for Israel's liberation process, the first thing we need to consider is geography. So the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh, he has given permission for the nation to leave. They've packed up, they have gotten ready, they're out the door, and they've begun traveling, but they're still within Egypt's borders. There's a lot of questions yet to be answered on their journey. Where are they headed? How long is it going to take to get there? What other nations must they travel through to get where they're going? Well, consider the logistics of this as well as the geography. Israel has 600,000 men. And so when you add the women and children, that's easily more than 1 million people on foot. They're walking, and they have hordes of animals with them. How will they provide for the necessities of water, of nourishment? I can't imagine how much food it would take to feed that many people and animals for just one day. And what if this trip turns out to be weeks or months? So with those questions in mind, and we're going to find out that there are many other questions that we could bring up, we turn to Exodus chapter 13, verse 17, to check on the people of Israel and find out how they're doing in this mass exodus and just what this roadblock is all about. Well, right away in that chapter, we read about war. It's not war from Pharaoh. It's war, the possibility of war from other nations in the area. I mean, think about how those other nations would feel. Once they leave Egypt and there's 1 million plus people just walking through that particular nation, the other nations would probably feel very similar to how some in the United States feel today about people entering our country. We hear things like they'll take our jobs, they're going to eat our food, they're going to make life difficult for us, it's going to cost us a lot, they might hurt us. Concerns about immigration have been on people's minds for millennia. But nearly all immigrants, refugees, and asylum seekers throughout history, all across the world, are like Israel. At that moment, they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They don't want to be in slavery in Egypt. And God doesn't want the people to face war by sending them through the lands of nations who will make war against them. The best alternative would be for the people of Israel to take the shortest possible route to get to their new home, to get to this place of peace. But is there even a new home ready and waiting for them? Well, we're going to find out about that in the future, of course. But for now, the shortest trip is precarious because it would mean traveling through Philistine country. And the Philistines were war-hardened. They were war-ready people. And God knows very well that if Israel faces a conflict with Philistia, that conflict could demoralize the people of Israel, and they just want to give up and go back to Egypt. So they have to travel a different route. It's a longer route. And that takes them to a massive roadblock, a body of water. It's what we call the Red Sea or the Reed Sea. In ancient Hebrew, it's actually called the Suf Sea. If you look on a world map, you will see the Red Sea located on the eastern coast of Egypt. Now, scholars have debated about where the nation of Israel might have crossed on their migration. What body of water are we even talking about here? There's all sorts of opinions. It is possible, though, that God led the people right up to the banks of the modern-day Red Sea on Egypt's east coast. But we learn, however, that though God led them away from the shorter route, the people were ready for battle. And we read that in verse 18, and I thought, wait a minute, how ready for battle are they? Well, we don't know. It's likely that they expected war to come upon them. And as we'll see in the next chapter, they do have an army. It's unlikely, however, that Israel had a well-equipped or well-trained army that could compete with the militaries of the surrounding nations. And it seems that they're aware, though, that they're a massive group of people that are going to be encroaching on other people's lands, and so they would have expected conflict. Well, in verses 19 and 20, we learn that Moses brought along the bones of their ancestor Joseph to keep that promise. Now, last week, in chapter 12, verse 37, we learned that Israel's first stage of their journey was from Ramses to Succoth in Egypt. Now they go to Etham, still in Egypt, but they're on the edge of the desert. And they're following God himself. God's right there. He's manifesting himself in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Now we know God is spirit, meaning he's invisible. He doesn't have any physical manifestation. But here in Exodus 13:21, we're reminded that God is omnipotent. He's all powerful. He's easily able to manifest himself in a physical way when he wants to. And he does so clearly and powerfully, guiding the Israelites, assuring them of his presence. But it seems that God has an even more personal relationship with Moses. They talk. They have conversations. And as we move into chapter 14, God tells Moses to instruct the people to actually turn back. I think, whoa, what in the world would that be about? They're leaving Egypt. They're not turning back. He wants to make it look like Israel is wandering in confusion. This sounds really risky. If I'm one of the Israelites, I'm thinking, wait a minute, my water, my food supply is not going to last forever. Why would you want us to turn back? Shouldn't the people get away from Egypt as fast as possible? But God spells out the reason for this odd choice. He knows Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh has clearly shown he's hard-hearted. And so God knows how Pharaoh will respond if he finds out about Israel's erratic journeying in this just beginning part of their journey. God is setting a trap for Pharaoh. It's kind of faking Pharaoh out. But God's real purpose is not to play games with the people or play games with Pharaoh. God's real purpose, as he says in verse 4, is that it might bring glory to himself. He's going to gain glory for himself in the eyes of the people of Israel when they see how victorious God is. He also says that through what is about to happen, he'll gain glory in the eyes of the Egyptians because they will know that he is Lord. And so the Israelites do what he says. They're turning back. And this is not a small thing. In my mind, they are placing their trust in God as bait for a trap. Those Israelites, I mean, yes, they number 1 million plus. Yes, they have 600,000 men. But they would be no match for Pharaoh's army. The Egyptian army was one of the most powerful in that region. If the Egyptians find out that Israel is there like sitting ducks in the desert, Pharaoh could easily destroy them. But Israel obeys. And that they do that. And they place themselves in God's hands right there in Pharaoh's crosshairs. This is amazing obedience. And Pharaoh does find out. He immediately regrets his decision to let them go because there goes his whole workforce. And he musters his army and he rides out with 600 chariots and even more. But notice Israel's response there in verse 8. It says they march boldly as well. I love that. They're bold in their trust of God and God's plan. But not for long. As the dust clouds being kicked up by the wheels of the Egyptian chariots appear on the horizon, suddenly Israel has a change of heart. Terror overwhelms them and they cry out to God. They also get really upset with Moses as if he has brought them out here to die. It seems like all is lost. And Moses says this in verses 13 and 14. Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance of the Lord. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. What a message. What a message for us too. I mean, there are plenty of times in life when we are frustrated and fearful, maybe even despairing of the situation that we're going through. And my guess is you know that feeling of all seems lost. And those times, like the people of Israel, watching the armies of Pharaoh get closer and closer, it can be difficult to be still and let God fight. But Moses reminds us that we can. We can stand firm in the knowledge of who God is, that He is for us. And so, with the Suf Sea before them and the Egyptian cavalry approaching fast behind them, God does fight for Israel. He commands Moses to raise his staff and stretch out his arm over the sea and divide the water so that the Israelites can cross on dry ground. And immediately, two things happen. First, we learn that the angel of God was in front of Israel's army. It's kind of the first we're hearing about this angel of the Lord. Did the people see the angel? What was this like? We don't exactly know. The angel, though, moves from the front on the Red Sea side, comes to the back between Israel and the Egyptian army. And second, the pillar of cloud does the same, creating this wall between Israel and the army of Egypt. And we learn that the cloud blocks out the light so that it's dark for Egypt and allows light for the people of Israel to see so that they can walk through the sea. Moses obeys God, and the sea splits as God sends a wind to divide the waters, and the Israelites walk through the sea on dry ground. It is one of the most astounding miracles in the Bible. I think if I saw that, I would be amazed, I'd be scared, I would be intimidated, very impressed, kind of all at once. We don't know how long it takes, but eventually the Egyptians are allowed to pass, and they follow the Israelites into the sea. But God isn't done fighting for Israel. He first throws the Egyptians into a confusion so that they cannot overtake the Israelites. And then he asks Moses to stretch out his hand again over the sea, and the waters crash back into place, decimating the Egyptians. In verse 31, we read, "When the Israelites saw the mighty hand of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses, his servants." And there, feared the Lord means they respected him. There was awe, there was reverence. They gave their hearts to the Lord. So this is a victory of massive proportions. Israel is free of Egypt. God has done it. Now, I want you to take a look on your own into chapter 15, verses 1 through 21. Now that we've read and studied the story of the parting of the Red Sea, take a look at how Moses and his sister Miriam respond in chapter 15, verses 1 through 21. They write 2 songs of praise to God, and they sing it with celebration, joy, and dancing. They are celebrating God's power and his protection. And so we learn from this story the important principle: be still and trust in God. I think we humans have a natural tendency to want to take matters into our own hands. There are many times that we Christians will say that we're praying, but we wish we could do more. And we can reveal that perhaps when we pray, we don't fully trust in God to do it. Now, God doesn't always promise spectacular deliverance when we cry out to him. Being still and trusting in him is not a guarantee of getting what we think God should do for us. And additionally, it's good to pray and plan and to commit our way to the Lord and actually to follow through with action. But notice that Israel heard a plan from God. It was a risky plan, and they obeyed. They didn't need to fight. They needed to follow God's plan, and he would fight for them. We can make it our practice to do the same. Be still. Pray. Obey what you know God wants you to do, and wait for him to act. No matter what situation you're going through, we can be still and know that God is for